In 6 months, Japan swept from Pearl Harbor across Southeast Asia to the oil fields of the Dutch East Indies, overwhelming every force in its path. It was one of the most devastating military offensives in modern history. Yet Japan imported 96% of its oil. How did a resource-starved nation achieve such rapid success, and why did its strategy ultimately fail? Japanese military planners in the late 1930s faced a stark arithmetic. The home islands produced only a fraction of the oil, rubber, tin, iron ore, and bauxite needed to sustain a modern war machine. In 1937, Japan consumed 3.4 million tons of oil, but could extract just 150,000 tons domestically, leaving the country 96% dependent on imports. Similar gaps existed for rubber and tin, with over 90% sourced from abroad. These figures, compiled by the Ministry of Commerce and the Imperial General Headquarters, shaped every strategic calculation. When the United States imposed an oil embargo in July 1941, the crisis became acute. Planners at the Imperial General Headquarters responded by mapping a defensive perimeter that would stretch from the northern Kuriles to the resource-rich Dutch East Indies in the south. The logic was direct: secure the territories that could supply the raw materials to fuel Japan's industry and armed forces. The Dutch East Indies alone promised 3.5 million tons of oil annually, enough to close the pre-war deficit. British Malaya offered rubber and tin, while Burma and the Philippines were targeted for oil, iron, and bauxite. Imperial General Headquarters Directive No. 12, issued in April 1939, called for the acquisition of enough oil, iron, and other materials to sustain a 10-year war economy. This was not an abstract ambition. The size and shape of the planned perimeter matched the geography of resources, not ideology. Each campaign, whether in Malaya, Burma, or the East Indies, was timed to match the expected delivery of vital supplies. Japan's military expansion was, at its core, a calculated effort to build an economic lifeline, transforming strategic shortages into territorial objectives. Kantai-kessen, the doctrine of decisive battle, shaped every layer of Japanese naval planning before and during the early Pacific War. At its core, the concept called for a single, overwhelming clash between main fleets, with the victor securing command of the seas. This idea, rooted in the victory at Tsushima, was not discarded as technology advanced. Instead, it adapted. By the late 1930s, the Imperial Japanese Navy's staff colleges and war games had begun to shift the focus from battleship gunnery to carriers and carrier aviation. Diagrams from the Kaigun archives show how carrier task forces, not battleship lines, became the new centerpiece of operational plans. The Kido Butai, Japan's main carrier strike group, was designed to deliver the first crippling blow, neutralizing enemy air power before a surface engagement could even begin. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, educated in both Japanese and American naval traditions, championed this evolution. He argued that only a concentrated carrier force could achieve the surprise and striking power needed to offset American industrial might. Yet this doctrinal shift was not universally accepted. The Army and the Navy, divided by bureaucratic rivalry and separate command structures, clashed over priorities. The Navy insisted on massing carriers for decisive operations, while the Army demanded resources for rapid territorial expansion and for garrisoning newly seized areas. These disagreements played out in staff meetings and in planning documents, often leading to compromises that diluted the intended concentration of force. War games at the Naval Staff College revealed the risks of divided command. Simulations showed that dispersing carriers or splitting air groups to support Army operations reduced the fleet's ability to achieve a decisive outcome. Despite these warnings, inter-service friction persisted. As a result, the operational logic of Kantai-kessen to concentrate power, strike first, and force a decision was often at odds with the realities of joint campaign planning. This tension would soon shape the course of Japan's opening moves in the Pacific. On December 7, 1941, Japanese carrier groups launched a coordinated assault on Pearl Harbor, crippling the United States Pacific Fleet's battleship force and seizing the initiative across the Pacific. Within hours, Japanese forces moved against the Philippines, Hong Kong, Malaya, and Thailand, using rapid amphibious landings supported by carrier aviation and coordinated ground attacks. The speed and scale of these operations stunned Allied planners. By February 15, 1942, British forces in Singapore surrendered, marking the largest capitulation in British military history. Japanese operational commands pressed forward, capturing Rangoon in Burma and securing key oil fields and transportation hubs. In the Dutch East Indies, Japanese landings overwhelmed Dutch, British, and Australian defenders. By early March, Java and Sumatra had fallen, delivering 3.2 million tons of oil reserves into Japanese hands, enough to cover more than a year's military consumption based on pre-war estimates. The campaign's tempo left little time for Allied regrouping. Coordinated air and naval strikes isolated garrisons and cut off retreat routes, while the Imperial General Headquarters issued fresh orders to press the advance deeper into the resource zone. In just 90 days, the Japanese military had captured a defensive perimeter stretching from the Kuriles in the north to the resource-rich islands of the south, controlling a vast arc of territory and achieving the central aim of their southern strategy. The Southern Blitz demonstrated the operational reach and doctrinal confidence of Japan's armed forces at their zenith, before the first cracks in logistics and coordination began to show. In early 1942, Japanese carrier aviation set a new standard for naval warfare. Pilots of the Kido Butai arrived with over 700 hours of flight training, far surpassing their Allied counterparts. This level of preparation produced air crews capable of executing long-range, coordinated strikes with remarkable precision. The Mitsubishi A6M-0, with a combat radius of 1,600 kilometers, extended the reach of Japanese carriers, allowing them to strike targets deep inland and at sea without warning. In the opening months of the war, Japanese pilots swept aside opposition from the Philippines to the Indian Ocean, their tactics and skill leaving Allied forces reeling. Beneath these early triumphs, however, lay structural weaknesses. The rigorous training pipeline that produced such elite pilots was slow and resource-intensive. By 1942, the Imperial Navy struggled to replace combat losses, and the focus on quality over quantity left little room for attrition. Every downed pilot represented months of irreplaceable investment. Industrial capacity proved another blind spot. Japanese planners assumed the United States could produce 2 fleet carriers per year. In reality, American shipyards were preparing to launch more than a dozen by the end of 1943, along with hundreds of escort carriers and thousands of aircraft. This miscalculation meant Japan's initial edge in carrier strength would quickly erode. Strategic doctrine shaped the use of submarines as well. Japanese submarines were ordered to target enemy capital ships, rarely attacking merchant shipping. In contrast, the U.S. Navy focused on disrupting supply lines, crippling Japanese logistics. By leaving Allied shipping largely untouched, Japan allowed American industry to move troops and materiel across the Pacific, setting the stage for a war of attrition that would expose the fragility beneath early victories. 4 Japanese fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, were lost between June 4th and 7th, 1942, at the Battle of Midway. Their destruction, along with the loss of hundreds of experienced aviators, abruptly ended Japan's ability to dictate the tempo of naval warfare in the Pacific. In the months that followed, the struggle for Guadalcanal became a grinding contest of attrition. From August 1942 through February 1943, Japanese and Allied forces fought for control of Henderson Field, with neither side able to secure clear air or sea superiority. The Imperial Navy's carrier arm, once the spearhead of Japanese strategy, could no longer recover from such losses. Frontline troops faced a new reality. Instead of rapid advances, they now endured a protracted fight where reinforcements and supplies grew scarce. The momentum that had carried Japan across the Pacific was decisively checked. By 1944, the machinery that once powered Japan's war effort was breaking down. Allied submarines, operating with new torpedoes and coordinated tactics, cut off the flow of oil and raw materials. More than half of Japan's tanker fleet, 56%, was lost to submarine attacks, a figure confirmed by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey. Fuel deliveries fell so sharply that frontline units rationed every drop, and warships often remained idle for lack of oil. American bombers targeted refineries and transport hubs, accelerating the collapse. Merchant shipping losses reached nearly 5 million tons by 1944, while Japan's industrial output dropped by almost half compared to pre-war levels. In the air, the pilot training pipeline could not keep pace with losses. By late 1944, new aviators averaged less than 50 hours of flight time, a dramatic fall from the 700-hour standard of early war crews. The core lesson is clear. Even the most daring strategy cannot survive without secure logistics and the industrial capacity to sustain it. In modern warfare, supply lines and production matter as much as doctrine or tactics. Bold strategy can deliver swift victories, but only sustained resources and adaptable doctrine secure lasting success. Today, military powers still face a dilemma: rapid gains or enduring strength. The lesson endures. Strategy alone cannot outrun reality. Subscribe for more deep dives into military strategy and warfare history.